5 forgotten mental illnesses. Some of these psychiatric conditions have evolved over time into common disorders we know today. Others have completely disappeared. Once thought to be the result of religious punishment or demonic possession, mental illness has come a long way. When we think about mental illnesses today, common conditions like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder come to mind. But if you check the history books, you'll find plenty of once trendy, now forgotten mental illnesses. Hysteria, a female mental illness. Hysteria was once a common medical diagnosis for women. In fact, some researchers describe hysteria as the first mental disorder attributable to women. It was thought to be characterized by extreme emotion, nervousness, faintness, insomnia, and sexual desire, among other symptoms. Hysteria diagnoses began to decline in the late 19th and early 20th centuries for various debated reasons, including misdiagnosis and evolving scientific evidence. The concept of hysteria was removed with the 1980 Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 3. Now, hysterical symptoms are considered a manifestation of a complex set of disorders, including dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity disorder, conversion disorder, and somatization disorder. Neurasthenia, predecessor of chronic fatigue. The medical condition neurasthenia was first developed in 1869 by American neurologist George Beard. Symptoms of neurasthenia included depression, anxiety, migraines, and insomnia, according to the American Psychological Association. The disorder was thought to be connected to overworking the brain and excessive stress by those in more demanding professional or business roles. Both men and women could be diagnosed with neurasthenia, but treatment depended on their gender. Women with neurasthenia were often prescribed strict bed rest, while men were encouraged to participate in strenuous physical activity and later write about it. Soldier's heart, an early version of PTSD. What we now know as PTSD has evolved over time, particularly as it relates to war veterans. During the Civil War, Kazamatis explains, there was a certain amount of empathy for soldiers returning from battle. But things changed after World War I when it became known as shell shock. It was a really shameful thing for soldiers to get this diagnosis, Kazamatis said. Men were just expected to go to war and not talk about anything when they returned. It wasn't until after the Vietnam War that PTSD was recognized as a serious, well-defined mental illness. The vapors, a condition of the more delicate sex. The vapors, whose origin is closely related to the term hysteria, was another condition that affected women in the Victorian era. Characterized by fainting, moodiness, anxiousness, and agitation, the vapors was a reflection of the overall societal view of women at the time. This was part of women being seen as the more delicate sex and needing to be cared for by a man, Kazamatis says. It was even believed that the tightness of Victorian women's corsets contributed to the onset of vapors. Ladies needed to be protected from the stresses of life. They shouldn't have the pressure of making decisions, Kazamatis says. Women were almost treated like children by their husbands in some ways at this time. Glass delusion, social contagion spread by a king. Glass delusion describes a mental illness in which a person believed they were entirely made of glass. Common during the Middle Ages in Europe, the unusual delusion caused people to believe they could be shattered at any moment. King Charles VI of France was an early victim of this disorder. The medieval king reportedly wrapped blankets around him to prevent himself from accidentally breaking. Although anxious about shattering, people affected by the delusion were still considered normal and could perform daily functions, reports the BBC. It must have been an awful, anxiety-inducing way to live, Kazimaitis says. The delusion was quite common throughout Europe for about 200 years, from the 15th to the 17th century. Some experts hypothesized that the delusion had elements of social contagion. With a huge wave of people thinking they're brittle, it's almost as if it was the popular delusion to have at the time, Rosenthal says.